All right, so my week. My week has been a lot. Actually, we're going to probably go a little backwards in this. My week has been a lot of up and down because my first part of the week, I was like, oh, shoot, I have a lot of great opportunities coming ahead. Mm-hmm. I was like, I'm in the process of trying to maybe expand a little bit with the gym. Oh, wow. And so I was like, oh, shoot, this is an opportunity that I could possibly do that. Things look like it might have been going my way. Like the guy that I'm dealing with, it was like, okay, he's adjusting things that this might be able to work. Then midweek came, all that went out the window. It's like, nope, he's going at this price. He's doing this. He won't be able to assist in this way. I'm like, oh, shoot, that's not going to work for me anymore. And then by the end of the week, it's like, okay, this possibly could work for me again. So my week has been up and down. But I've always been the type of person to take biblical principles and apply it. Right. So, like, even like finding out taking a leap of faith and jumping into the gym. I did that with the strength off of reading some things in the books of Isaiah, Ecclesiastes, James, and there's one more. But I like to fuel my decisions or try to fuel my decisions off of the biblical principles. Mm-hmm. And so it just, light bulb moment. We talked about it on the last podcast. I was like, what if we talk about this topic again, but bring on other people and see what they thought about that point of view. So I don't know, like, do you believe that biblical, like the Bible, can relate to your personal life, and how can you possibly do that if that question makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, real quick. Did you have that written down, or that was off the top?
Hey, that's off the top of the dome, my friend.
I'm looking him in his eyes. I was off the top. And also, too, just to like go right into it, I think that essentially you asking, can you apply biblical principles? I think that for me, the Bible is essentially kind of what the world has built its whole our country at least has built a lot of its principles and foundation kind of off of like the Bible. Some of like the most basic things that we take in like our day-to-day life, right? Like, and I'm going very extreme with it, and I'm kind of watering it down to its most basic level. But even when you look at something like the 10 Commandments, just like every day starting and following those things is to some extent applying the biblical principles to your life. At least for me, that's kind of what I'm looking at when you ask that question.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Devin. Like the 10 Commandments, well, most of them anyway, have pretty much been like put into our laws and how we live our everyday life. So it's almost impossible to not. I mean, unless you're in jail, be living by most of those principles.
Wait, you don't believe that people in jail can follow those principles?
I believe that they might have broken those principles, and that's why they're in there.
Oh, but I feel like we talked about before. Wait, I just realized what he said. But that's funny. I just think about like me personally too. Like the 10 Commandments, it's almost impossible to follow all those, right? Like I feel like whether you're in jail or not, like you've broken the 10 Commandments.
At one point, yes. Yeah. But
I'm going to go ahead and guess they broke one of the big ones.
Yeah, like, Jesus. Which one did you write, though, Dre? I'm thinking the same thing, because I'm like, which one did you break, bro?
Yeah, I guess, okay, that's true, yeah.
Hey, are the cops about to show up on the pod or what?
Oh, that's funny.
I would look, though, from that kind of guidance from kind of you, Mr. Jeff, and you, Coach, as well. Like, you two obviously have probably y'all been here longer than us and have experienced different things from us, and so I think like our perspective is probably hasn't evolved to where you all's has been at yet. So to D's question, how do you all feel?
It's growing into those principles. I mean, if you look at the Bible and the principles that they have, I mean, everything that God has done through the different people, you see from, Adam all the way to the death of his disciples. I mean, they've all operated in most of the principles, but they've all failed in a lot of the principles as well. So the principles themselves are good, but it's based on the individual, whether you're going to follow them in your everyday life. And we all have a choice to do that. But the difference is if you're a Christian, you have the power of the Spirit to do it. If you're not a Christian, you don't have the power of the Spirit to do it. So it becomes very difficult because you're trying to operate in something that you really don't have the power to operate in, to do, or to complete. So,
So is that basically saying that there's, like, whether if you have the Spirit, or if you don't have the Spirit, you're just being a good person? Is that accurate to say?
And whose eyes?
what's
That's-
good?
Well, I guess that's true, because what is good and good?
How do you determine what's good and what's bad?
And that's why I'm saying we all kind of inadvertently apply these principles, because we base good and bad somewhat. A lot of us, not everybody, but a lot of us base good and bad off of, do you follow this core list of principles? And if you follow this core list, then you're good. You might not be good enough.
I'll say it like this. You guys mentioned the 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
When you think of the 10 Commandments, it's two parts. It's our worship of God, and it's our love for our fellow people. So when we're looking at those principles, I can say, for the most part, do most people honor God in their daily life? When you look at what he says, do not use my name in vain. Do not, do these things to God. So if I'm not operating there, it becomes very difficult for me to love my enemies or to do the things with others, not covet, not steal.
Yeah.
And see, the question will be, you're dealing with somebody and I'll say, do you steal? Well, not really.
Just sometimes.
Right. Or do you lie? Well, I told a little white lie. No, either you lie or you don't. Either you steal or you don't. So, that's why you can't look at just the 10 Commandments and say these principles. God has a lot of principles throughout the Bible. How do I handle my finances? That's a principle.
Yeah.
Am I living according to God's principle, or am I living according to what the world says, Wall Street says, or whoever?
I had a conversation with somebody at the gym one time, and we were talking about biblical principles and why we do the things that we do. And, with me having the belief and faith that I have, I do the things that I do to please God. And so we had the conversation of, like, what is good. And so we was talking about, like, God as a whole, as a totality, right? And this person was saying, well, how can you serve a God that could send someone to hell for just being a good person? Because, we had the conversation saying, like, just being a good person, opening the door for somebody, or giving money to the homeless is not necessarily going to get you into heaven. So there's like, why would you serve a God that is willing to put someone like that into hell?
What was your answer?
I told him, I don't really remember, Mr. Gunn. I don't.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, that's a fair question. I really don't remember exactly what I said, but if it's right now and this person asked me that, I was like, because I would say that God is a jealous God, and I would say that God doesn't want anything over him. So you have to choose God for God to choose you. And so just being a good person is not necessarily enough to get you into heaven.
Well, if you realize, the 10 Commandments, it wasn't designed for us to be able to follow them, to keep them. It's impossible because in our state. And so when you're looking at it, the 10 Commandments, and you look at what he's asking, do not commit adultery. Well, Jesus said, if you look at a woman with lust in your heart, you already committed adultery. And if you lie, he said, thou shalt not bear false witness. And so we couldn't do that without him. So that's why Christ came, by accepting him.
Right.
And then he's in you. The Father looks at him in you instead of you, because we can't do it on our own.
No.
Right. No one's going to keep all the principles, all the commandments. But to get back to your question, you made a statement that why would God send people to hell to do good things?
Yeah.
Understand that the Bible says we're all sinners. The punishment for sin is hell.
Right.
But the issue is we're born sinners. So we're born on our way to hell. It's God's choice to pull those out of going to hell. So when you ask that question, or someone asks you that question, what they're saying is, God is not necessarily sending people to hell. Everybody's going there. It's who he's plucking out from going to hell.
Dang, I wish you was there when I was talking to him, because that sounded a lot better than what I said.
I think that's kind of like, from my experience, that's been always the harsh reality though of like having a relationship with God, not having a relationship with God, being a Christian or not being a Christian, is like realizing that like just identifying as something isn't what gets you there.
Yeah.
Like you could be like, I didn't kill nobody, I'm a Christian, I'm probably going to heaven. Nope, you completely wrong. And like it takes actual, I think we all kind of like miss the mark of truly understanding how much work that it actually takes. And I think that's why we kind of, a lot of times we'll see people try to form God to be what's comforting for them.
Yeah, and that's what's scary is too, because that is, I like we talked about on the pod before, is that where my heart check came in, because you know Dre and Dev, y'all like knew me growing up, you know, and so one day I came home from college from church, or went to church from college, and Pastor May was up there preaching, and he asked the question, if you died today, are you comfortable with saying that you'll go to heaven? Like, you know, and I couldn't, even though like I was still going to church when I was coming home, you know, I was reading my Bible every now and then, you know, I lived a certain way. I still didn't think it was enough to get me into heaven based off of what the Bible says. And so I had to give myself a heart check. And so there's a lot of people. And then, what's that verse? Is it in Matthews where it says that, some will say, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy?
Matthew
7.
We did we not prophesy in your name? Did we not cast out demons in your name? And then God looks at them and says, I never knew you, even though they still did those certain practices. So it shows that just the practice of doing certain things isn't enough to necessarily get you into heaven.
Because you're operating from a mindset that doing those things is what saves you. Salvation is only through relationship with Jesus Christ. So you don't get caught up in having to do those things. You know, I tell people, you know, when I accepted Christ's death on the cross was the one that...
Is that me? Oh, that's your watch. Oh.
That's not my watch.
Oh.
That's not me.
I don't know what that was. Okay.
Just keep going.
So that's kind of what the mindset is.
And two, one thing that y'all just brought up that made me think too. Like I know all of our moms, me, D, R being me, D, and Dre. Like all of us know each other's moms pretty well. And a lot of the times when I think about our mothers, we all have those moms that like you would have to, when it comes to doing something, like what Mr. Jeff just said, right? Somebody doing something nice for somebody or just doing something for somebody else. We all have those moms that sometimes we would likely look at them for doing something nice for somebody and be like, why would you do that? Were you not thinking about what could have went wrong? Why would you do something like this? Like we, all three of us have that mom that we would question like, Mom, what were you thinking? And their response would be more focused on what somebody else needed and not necessarily like focused on doing something for somebody because of what they would get or doing something for somebody because of any other alternative. And that's not necessarily like my perspective or our response, but I think that it's like a human response to think about yourself before you do something. And even sometimes we'll think about ourselves. Like I work in nonprofit. Sometimes I'll work with people who do certain things just to feel good about themselves, whether it's like volunteering or donating money. And I guess I just brought that point up because like when Mr. Jeff was saying, like there's a difference in when you do stuff.